Graduation day is supposed to feel loud. Applause. Laughter. Families crowding together, hugging, taking photos, arguing about where to eat afterward. Mine felt silent. The ceremony itself passed in a blur. I walked across the stage, shook the principal's hand, accepted my diploma, and smiled for a camera that wasn't mine. Somewhere in the crowd, people clapped. Parents stood up, cheering for their children. I scanned the seats out of habit, even though I already knew what I wouldn't find. No familiar faces. No waving hands. No proud smiles meant for me. I told myself not to care. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I was used to this. When the ceremony ended, the gym emptied fast. Groups formed instantly, families clustering together, classmates posing for photos, friends shouting names across the room. I stood near the exit for a moment, holding my diploma folder, watching everyone else be claimed. No one came for me. I walked to my car alone. The parking lot was still warm from the sun. I sat behind the wheel for a long minute, hands resting uselessly in my lap, unsure what to do next. There was nowhere to go. No plans. No celebration waiting. I pulled out of the lot and drove to a fast food place a few blocks away. It wasn't special. It was just close. I ordered a burger and fries and carried the bag back to my car. I didn't go inside. I didn't feel like sitting under bright lights surrounded by strangers who looked happier than I felt. I parked in the shade and ate in silence. Through the windshield, I watched families drive past. Cars full of balloons. People leaning out of windows, laughing. I unwrapped my burger slowly, not really hungry, just needing something to do with my hands. My phone stayed silent. No missed calls. No messages. Not even a late excuse. I chewed and swallowed, staring straight ahead, trying to keep my face neutral in case anyone walked by. I didn't want pity. I didn't want questions. I was halfway through my food when something unexpected happened. A shadow crossed the driver's side window. I frowned slightly, glancing to my left. Someone knocked. Not hard. Just once. I froze. For a split second, my heart jumped. My first thought was irrational. That somehow my parents had finally shown up, that they'd found me, that they'd decided at the last minute to care. I rolled the window down halfway. It wasn't them. It was the principal. He stood there holding a folder, his expression unreadable. Behind him, the sun reflected off the school building across the street. I thought that was you, he said gently. I swallowed. Hi. He glanced at the burger wrapper in my lap, then back at my face. Something in his expression shifted. Not pity, not judgment, but recognition. Mind if I talk to you for a moment, he asked. I nodded and opened the door. We stood beside my car. He didn't rush. He didn't speak right away. He looked at me the way adults sometimes do when they're trying to decide how honest to be. I noticed something today, he finally said. I waited. You walked alone, he continued. You left alone. I felt my throat tighten, but I kept my voice steady. Yeah, he hesitated. Is that normal for you? I shrugged. Depends on the day. He didn't smile. I've been reviewing records, he said. Scholarships. Recommendations. Family contact information. My stomach twisted slightly. Okay. He took a breath. Your parents never responded to a single email. Not once. I laughed quietly, the sound sharp and uncomfortable. That sounds about right. He studied my face carefully. You didn't tell anyone. I didn't think it mattered, I said. He shook his head slowly. It does. We stood there in silence for a moment. Cars passed behind him. Somewhere, someone honked, impatient to get home and celebrate. I came to give you this, he said, holding out the folder. I was going to mail it, but I'm glad I didn't. I took it, confused. Inside were documents I hadn't seen before. Letters. Forms. Official seals. What is this? I asked. Opportunities, he replied. Ones you qualify for. Ones that don't require family approval. I looked up at him, startled. You earned these, he said firmly. Even if no one showed up to say it out loud. My chest felt tight, but not in the painful way it had all day. Thank you, I said quietly. He nodded. One more thing. Yes? He met my eyes. You shouldn't have been alone today. Then he stepped back, gave a small, respectful nod, and walked away. I sat back in my car, the folder resting on my lap. My burger was cold now. I didn't finish it. Because for the first time that day, I wasn't thinking about who didn't show up. I was thinking about what had just opened. I sat in my car for a long time after the principal left. The parking lot felt different now, not emptier, not fuller, just quieter in a way that allowed thoughts to rise instead of crash. I opened the folder again, slowly this time, like I was afraid the contents might disappear if I moved too fast. Letters. Programs. Recommendations already written. My name printed cleanly at the top of each page. Not their names. Not family approval required. Just me. I hadn't realized how used I'd become to being invisible until someone finally saw me. I drove home with the folder on the passenger seat like it mattered, like it deserved its own place. The house was dark when I arrived. No balloons. No congratulations. No questions about how the ceremony went. I let myself in quietly and went straight to my room. My phone buzzed once. A message from my mother. Did you eat? That was it. Not where were you? Not I'm sorry we missed it. Just a routine question, sent out of habit. I stared at the screen, then set the phone face down. That night, I read every page in the folder. I didn't skim. I didn't rush. I absorbed every word like proof that the world outside this house had space for me. Over the next few days, I didn't say much. Neither did they. My parents moved through the house like nothing had happened. My mother talked about errands. My father mentioned bills. They acted as if graduation day had been just another inconvenience that had passed. They didn't ask where I'd gone afterward. They didn't ask who I'd talked to. They assumed they already knew everything. I let them. I started making calls. Quiet ones. Careful ones. I spoke to counselors, advisors, coordinators. I asked questions I'd never asked before about deadlines, housing, funding. I learned what was possible without family signatures. What doors were already half open. Every conversation made something clearer. I wasn't behind. I was just unsupported. One afternoon, my sister came into my room without knocking. So, she said, leaning against the doorframe. What's next for you? I looked up from my laptop. Why? She shrugged. Just curious. I closed the screen. I'm figuring things out. She smirked. Good luck with that. I met her gaze calmly. I don't need luck. That annoyed her more than anger ever would have. A week later, my parents called a family meeting. They sat at the dining table, faces serious, like this was about discipline or responsibility. I took a seat across from them, my posture relaxed. We've been thinking, my father began. About your future. I waited. You need to be realistic, my mother added. Without our support, your options are limited. I nodded slowly. I agree. They looked relieved. So, my mom continued, we expect you to stay home. Work locally. Help out. There it was. The plan they'd written without me. I took a breath. I won't be doing that. Silence. My father frowned. What do you mean? I mean I'm leaving. My sister laughed from the hallway. You can't. I looked at her. I can. My mom's voice sharpened. You don't have the means. I slid the folder onto the table. They stared at it, confused. What's this? My dad asked. Options, I replied. Ones you didn't bother looking into. My mom opened it, flipping through pages faster than she was actually reading. Her expression changed, not to anger, not to fear, but to something close to disbelief. These don't involve us, she said. That's the point, I replied. She looked up at me. Who gave you this? I hesitated for half a second. Then, someone who noticed I was alone. The room felt suddenly unbalanced. My sister crossed her arms. You're being dramatic. I smiled faintly. You're being irrelevant. That landed harder than I expected. My parents tried to argue. They talked about risks, about family, about consequences. I listened politely. When they finished, I stood up. I ate alone on graduation day, I said calmly. You didn't even notice. They didn't deny it. I'm done explaining myself. That night, I started packing. Not in secret. Not in anger. With intention. I packed slowly. Not because I wasn't sure, but because I wanted to remember the feeling. Every folded shirt, every book slipped into my bag, every quiet movement through that room felt like closing a chapter I'd been living in far too long. No one stopped me. My parents stayed in the living room, voices low, pretending not to notice. My sister hovered in the hallway for a while, watching me like she was waiting for something dramatic, for tears, for second thoughts, for me to ask permission. I didn't. When my bag was zipped, I paused in the doorway and took one last look at the room. It didn't feel like loss. It felt like relief. I left before dawn. The house was still asleep, or at least pretending to be. I didn't leave a note. I didn't owe them closure. I drove away with the windows down, the early morning air cool against my face, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was running. I was choosing. The weeks that followed were hard, but clean. I moved into a small place close to campus housing, temporary at first, then permanent. I worked part-time. I filled out forms. I showed up to meetings alone. No one asked about my parents. No one assumed I needed permission. I kept thinking about graduation day. About sitting alone in my car, eating a burger that tasted like disappointment, believing for a moment that that loneliness defined me. It didn't. It was just a moment before everything changed. I got accepted. Then another acceptance came. Then funding. Each email felt unreal, like proof that the life I'd imagined quietly, without ever saying it out loud, was actually possible. My phone buzzed more often now. Messages from my parents started polite, then confused, then irritated. Why didn't you tell us? This affects the family. You're being selfish. My sister tried last. You think you're better than us now? I didn't reply. Silence had taught me something important. Not every message deserves an answer. Some people only reach out when they realize they no longer have control. Months later, I saw photos online. My sister smiling at a party. My parents standing proudly beside her. Life continuing exactly as it always had, without noticing what was missing. Me. And that was fine. Because I wasn't missing anymore. I was busy. Busy building a life that didn't require approval. Busy becoming someone who didn't wait to be invited. Busy learning that family isn't defined by who shows up when you succeed, but by who notices when you're alone. Sometimes I think about that knock on my window. About how close I came to believing that graduation day was proof of my worth. It wasn't. It was the last day I accepted being overlooked. And the first day I learned that the people who fail to show up for you don't get to decide how far you go afterward.